From handcuffs to his bed, now he's mine. One night in handcuffs turned into a love affair I can't escape. I crouched at the edge of the rooftop. The city skyline under the twilight was perfectly contrasting with my camera lens, and just when I found the angle for the right shot, a low, commanding voice froze me mid-click. "Hands where I can see them." Startled, I almost dropped my camera. I turned around slowly and found myself face to face with a man who looked like he'd walked straight out of one of my fantasies. A sharp jawline, dark blue eyes, and a uniform that might as well have been tailored for a magazine cover. And don't let me start on the body. Hi?" I said, raising my hands, camera slopping against the cords around my neck. "What's the charge, Officer Handsome? Attempting art?" He snorted. "Try trespassing," he said as he reached for his handcuffs, and my jaw just dropped. Whoa, hold on," I stammered. "I'm not a criminal, I'm a photographer." I moved my head down to make him look at my camera. "See? Photographer or not," he said, stepping closer, "you're on private property, and you're not supposed to be here." I suffocated a laugh. "Yeah, but how else am I supposed to get the shot?" I countered. "You know, the only way to capture the city's heart is from up, not the sidewalks." He blinked, clearly annoyed. "What I know is that you're 2 seconds away from spending the night in a holding cell." Great. That couldn't be happening. That hot guy was definitely new, and my sister was out of the city, so how could I explain that I was indeed allowed to be there? The whole building was closed for the reformations. Well, if with her it didn't work, I'd have to call Mum. Don't know what's worse. "Is this necessary?" I asked, wincing as the cold metal clicked into place. "My sister owns the building. You can ask anyone." "Yeah, right." I knew he wouldn't buy it. Wait, I pleaded, though I knew that would get me in trouble, but the urge was stronger than anything else. "Wouldn't that make you my first arresting officer? Should I commemorate this with another picture?" His lips twitched, but I saw the way he tried not to laugh, and I found that extremely cute. "Turn around," he said seriously, snapping the cuffs around my wrists tighter than necessary, I must say. "You're really going along with that?" I asked, wincing at the cold metal. "Or are you just trying to live the buddy cop fantasy? I can cope and be the harmless photographer. If I were roughing you up, you wouldn't be still talking," he replied dryly. "Ouch," I muttered. "You're lucky you're so attractive, otherwise you'd get fired once my family knows about it, but it's your choice," I shrugged. "Could you just give me your number before throwing me in a cell?" He ignored me, and the ride to the station was far less glamorous than I imagined. I sat, still cuffed, while Officer Handsome drove in silence, and I finally read the tag on his shirt saying his last name. "So, Officer Montgomery," I said again. "If you wanted to spend more time together, you could have just asked me out for coffee." He didn't respond, but I caught the faintest twitch of his jaw in the rearview mirror. Progress. I still tried to charm my way out of trouble, but spoiler alert, it didn't work. He ushered me into the holding area. "Isn't this a bit extreme?" I pointed as he guided me to a cell. "Breaking the law has consequences," he replied, already on the other side of the bars. "So, does having a face that hot?" I shot back. "Did you notice that half of the station is staring at you? Pretty much, that's called workplace distraction." His lips twitched again, and for a fraction of a second, I thought I softened him. "Use your phone call wisely," he said before leaving. A few minutes later, I was guided to the phone placements, and I tried my, just to be clear, older sister because I was pretty sure she'd pick up once seeing the police department number. And I was right. Better than Mum. Thank God. "You what?" Emily's voice boomed through the receiver. "How do you keep getting yourself into these situations, Tyler?" "I'm an artist," I defended. "And that sometimes means bending a few rules, which I thought we settled is not a rule for me, your baby brother." She sighed. "Put the officer on." I smiled at him and leaned on the phone. "For you." I watched, trying not to grin as his expression shifted from authority to surprise. "Yes, ma'am," he said, nodding at whatever she said. "I wasn't informed about that, but I understand it now. Yes, of course. Won't happen again." When he hung up, he took my cuffs off and returned my camera. "You're free to go," he said tightly, as if his pride was hurt. "Oh, come on, don't be mad," I teased. "This isn't the first time, and you're new here." I placed my hand above my heart with mockery. "God forgives you, plus, it was cute." He didn't answer, but I could see the slightest blush on his neck. As I walked out, I turned back with a smile. "Hey." "What?" he asked, pissed still. "Next time I'm on a rooftop, try bending me over first before handcuffing me." I could see he was trying not to choke, and that was so fun I widened my smile. Instead, he shook his head. "But just so we're clear, isn't this where you're supposed to say, 'Stay out of trouble, kid'?" Silence again. Then he turned his back on me and started walking away. "For the record," I yelled, "your nickname is Officer Handsome now. Tell your friends." He paused for a split second before continuing his descent. I couldn't be sure, but I thought I saw his shoulders shake with laughter. A few hours later, I met my friends at a pub. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, recounting my encounter with Officer Handsome. And then he let me go. No number, no nothing. Just walked away all grumpy, I concluded. The table erupted into laughter, and one of my friends nearly spilt their beer. Wait, Amy said between giggles, wiping her eyes. "He cuffed you, didn't get your number, and you're calling that the meet cute of the year?" "I mean, it's got potential," I said, smirking. "Next time, though, maybe I'll get his name. Or dinner, who knows?" "You're hopeless," Matt teased. I laughed but found my thoughts lingering on him as the conversation shifted. The sharp blue eyes, the almost smile he tried so hard to hide, the way his blush crept past his collar. I shook my head, forcing myself back into the moment. Anyway, it's not like I'm going to see him again. As my days passed, I still couldn't shake Officer Montgomery out of my mind. I discovered his name was Matthew, beautiful as him. So, when I walked into the bar that night, I didn't need to mention how much I did not expect to meet him there. He was sitting alone at the counter's far end, nursing a drink, his uniform replaced by a hoodie and jeans. Damn. Even though he was all casual, something about him screamed control. He had a feral animal aura, and that only made him even hotter for me. I thought for a second about leaving, but I was too much of a brat for that. So my feet betrayed me, and I saw myself getting closer and leaning my body on the counter some inches from him. "Do you only patrol private places' roofs, or arrest people in bars too?" I said with a smile. He didn't flinch, not blink, just turned his head slowly, those eyes locking into mine, and I felt breathless. He bit his lip, and I didn't know if it was to stop a smile or from rage. He sighed, then took a quick sip. "Tyler," he said with his deep voice, "I didn't think I'd run into you here." "Me neither. I thought oldies like you didn't leave the couch in free time," I said, keeping my tone light, though the magnetic pull of his presence already had my pulse speeding up. I signaled to the bartender for a drink. "Now that you're here, I'd love to have stayed on the couch." I chuckled. "Ouch. Okay, I deserved it," I said, leaning a little closer to test the waters. "I never thought you'd be the type to unwind in places like this. You seem more like a gym and running at night type." The corner of his lips quirked upward slightly. "You don't know a thing about me besides my last name." "I know the first, too," I winked at him, then continued. "Prove me wrong, then." I shot back, my voice bolder than intended. His presence had that effect on me. I want to destroy that Mr. Right posture. He furrowed a brow as if accepting the challenge, and just like that, the tension shifted. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing effortlessly as we found common ground in music and movies and shared cynicism about the world. As the drinks kept coming, the distance between us closed, his sharp edges softening with each laugh and sarcastic remark. He wasn't the hard-edged cop tonight. He was just a man who was actually fun. And what in me was teasing became an attraction profoundly. He checked the clock, and we noticed the bar was about to close, so we decided to leave. The night's cold air was good on my face, and once I opened my eyes, I felt tipsy from the drinks and the fact that he was so close I could smell his whiskey breath. I touched his shoulder, rounding my finger there playfully. "So, do you also arrest people in bars?" My whole body shivered as I saw his eyes down from my eyes to my mouth, and his hands touched my waist. "Do you want me to arrest you?" he asked, leaning in, and kissed me. Not a shy one. He pulled me against his car door, and the cold of the metal made my heart race as his tongue dominated mine, drowning me in pleasure that felt like liquid lava. The way he was kissing me, it felt like he'd been holding back for too long. His hand slid up my neck, cupping it like he'd been waiting for this moment. And God, it was everything I hadn't known I wanted. His hands were rough against my hair, not letting me breathe as he ate me up right there in almost an empty, dark parking lot. I moaned, eager, and he pulled back, frustrating me. I stared at him, wide-eyed, aroused. "That's not how I imagined this night ending," I said, laughing slowly. He didn't say anything, just looked at me for a long moment, his gaze intense, searching. His hands ran through my body and I stayed still, scared of breaking whatever that was. When he found my middle parts, he finally smirked like the devil. "So, what's gonna be?" He grabbed me by the neck again, pretending to kiss me but stopping right before our lips touched. "Handcuffed to my bed or alone in your house?" he asked, the tongue so imposing that my legs shook. I laughed, completely surprised and excited. Doing the same, I pulled him by his collar and licked his chin. "To your bed, officer." And that night, it was wild. The type I could never forget. I blinked against the morning light streaming through the window, half convinced I'd imagined everything. But there he was, the stoic cop, asleep beside me. He looked different while sleeping. His usual guarded expression was replaced by a peaceful one, far from the uptight officer I thought I knew. As I shifted slightly, his eyes opened. He seemed disoriented for a moment, like he wasn't sure where and with whom he was. "Morning, Mr. Handcuffs." His gaze lingered on me, and the discomfort was palpable. The confident and funny man I'd slept with vanished. "I'll get going then if you're that disgusted," I said, standing up and looking for my clothes. He remained silent, which annoyed me. I sighed as I dressed in my jeans, and when I turned, he held on to my pulse. "Does it hurt?" he asked, and I looked at the sensual marks. "Not a bit," I gave him a bittersweet smile. "By the way, if I'm the first guy in your bed, I'm sorry, but I won't deal with this guilt between you and yourself. That's not... It's complicated," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Sure. Anyway, I had fun. Thanks for the charity." "Tyler," he called me, and the crack in his voice was the only reason I looked back. It was too good, and I'm not used to it. I gave him a sympathetic smile. "It's okay to be human, Matthew." His expression was unreadable, but his nod felt like a quiet acknowledgement. Who was he beneath the badge and all those walls? That's what I was wondering the whole way back home. After that night, we didn't talk about what it meant. I went with the flow, no labels, no asking, just us. Random, casual, until it became often. It started with dinner invitations, or to see my photographs, and I couldn't help saying yes to all of his requests. At first, it felt easy. Night walks, pizza on the couch, movies, but as weeks went on, I couldn't help but notice how he was stiff, all the time, even when relaxed. I could see how much he enjoyed it when I laughed at his jokes or other mundane moments of our days. But as I tried to open myself up, I couldn't give in completely because I felt like I was in the dark somehow. He was soft in one moment, then strict in the other. Okay, he's a cop, but we're together somehow. My emotions were a carefully balanced mess, part caution, part enchantment. I wanted to dive in, but I'd lived enough to know good things come with a cost, and that's why I didn't date. But Matthew, he was so incredible and scary, but I didn't know why precisely. In the middle of all that softness, there was the police officer in him, the justice, the protector. I'd catch him scanning every room when we left, what I could understand, safety, etc., but when it changed to sharp looks and active aggressive posture whenever someone came too close to me, I understood. Being with him was endearing, but also exhausting. I felt I was under constant surveillance, even if that came from a place of care. So, that afternoon, it all started with the crunch of metal. It was barely an accident, but the fender bender was messed up, and it left me shaking as I exchanged insurance information with the other driver. I didn't even consider calling him or the police, but he showed up anyway. "Are you hurt?" His voice cut through the people around us observing the accident. His tone was all command and authority. His eyes searched all over me, searching for injuries. "Matthew, I'm fine," I said, more annoyed than relieved. "How did you know I was here?" "All of your family's cars have scanners apps, and I was nearby," he said, like that was a simple phrase, already circling my car like a hawk. Once done, he looked at me. "You should have called me." "Didn't know I needed a babysitter now," I snapped. He glanced up, brows furrowed. "You don't, but I worry about you, Tyler." "That's bad." I just sighed. His protectiveness was sweet. Overwhelming, but sweet. Still, as he explained every detail to the tow truck driver, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just about the car and the caring. It was about control of me. He would never have it. From life, he needs lots of therapy for that. That I was sure. The day I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. My first photography exhibition. Weeks of late nights, endless cups of coffee, and second-guessing every frame had led me to this moment. The gallery buzzed with life, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, the occasional burst of laughter, and for once, the attention wasn't on someone else. It was on me, my art, my vision, my moment. Every photograph on those pristine white walls was a piece of me laid bare. I should have been floating, weightless with pride. But then I saw him, Matthew. He stood near the entrance, his presence impossible to ignore, arms crossed, back straight, and a gaze so sharp it could have carved marble. He wasn't looking at my art. He looked slightly out of place amongst the artists and socialites, his tailored blazer doing little to soften the sharp lines of his stance. But there was a quiet pride in his eyes, a subtle lift in his posture that made my chest tighten. For all his stoicism, he'd been my rock through the chaos of preparing for this night. Yet now, that pride was laced with something else, something sharper. He wasn't looking at my art. No, his eyes were locked on me, or more precisely, the gallery investor standing just a bit too close, laughing just a bit too loud. I was prepared to enchant whoever I needed to tonight, and the investor was no exception. I tried focusing on the talk, pouring my most convincing speeches and all, but every time I glanced at his way, he was still there, watching. The night went off, and as the gallery began to empty, I was running on fumes. And just when I thought I was free, a noisy journalist stopped me near the refreshments table, their tone sly. "Quite the crowd tonight, Tyler. You've come a long way since those colorful run-ins with the law, and now a police officer in your corner? Fascinating contrast," he remarked with a smirk thinly veiled. My stomach twisted, but I forced a polite smile. "It's called growth. Maybe you should try it sometime," I replied, brushing them off. The words lingered, though gnawing at me as I tried to refocus on the remaining guests. That's when Matthew cornered me by the refreshments table, his expression unreadable but tense, and he at least made the decency of whispering next to my face. "So that's how you talk with strangers?" he asked, his tone low but sharp. I blinked, caught off guard. I took him by the hand and made him follow me to an empty corner. "Excuse me? Not to mention all the others, but the guy you spent until now talking to," he said, jaw tight. "He was hanging on your every word, touching your arms, and you—" I cut him off, pissed. "And I what? Was being too friendly?" I shot back, sharp. "Smiled too much? Wow. God forbid I network at my own art show." His silence hit harder than any argument could have. I sighed. The words stuck in my throat, ready to finally spill. Not the way I wanted to, but in a spiral I couldn't stop. "What do you think I am, your property?" I said, my hands trembling as I struggled to keep my voice steady. Matthew, this is my night. I'm supposed to shine bright like a freaking diamond. I ran a hand through my hair and sighed deeply. You watched me all night like a freak. Do you want me to mess up so you could put the savior complex into action? Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe, but his pride held him back. And not only today, that night with my friends, the theater, the freaking car incident. What's all this about? I snapped, feeling the tears in my eyes. So what? Are you going to put me on a leash and give me a treat every time I get it right? I laughed bitterly. Go on and try me. I exhaled, the weight of the evening pressing down on me. I'm just trying to be there for you, he said, his tone softer but still defensive. Then trust me, I said, meeting his gaze with as much steadiness as I could mutter. My words echoed between us for a while, fragile but heavy, a thread pulled taut. Matthew didn't reply, not immediately. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it, his jaw clenching instead. I could see him fighting with something inside of him, but I was too tired for anything. As no words came out within the next minutes, we stood there, and he turned and walked away. For a moment I felt the relief of space, but it was quickly drowned out by the gnawing ache of what might have broken between us. It had been a few days since the gallery show, and something about Matthew had shifted. It was subtle at first. His texts came in later in the day, his laughter felt a beat too short, and when we spoke, there was a distance in his tone that hadn't been there before. I told myself I was imagining things, that work at the precinct was just wearing him down. But then, the late-night dinner came at my place. Matthew sat across from me at the kitchen table, poking at the spaghetti I'd made like it was an unsolved puzzle. His usual sharp eyes, the ones that could read me better than I could myself, were fixed downwards. All right, Mr. Handcuffs, spill, I said, leaning back in my chair. My voice was light, but my stomach was already twisting into knots. He hesitated, the fork clinking against the plate as he finally put it down. Some guys at work, they've been talking. He started, his voice measured like he was testing the waters. About what? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual even though my pulse quickened. Matthew didn't look up. About us. Us? I echoed, half laughing, half choked on the word. They're saying it's unprofessional, he continued, his jaw tightening. That it's a bad look for a cop to be dating someone with... He stopped, exhaling sharply like he couldn't bring himself to finish. With what? I pushed, though I already knew where this was going. A record, he said finally, the word landing between us like a brick. For a second, all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator. I let out a short laugh, more out of disbelief than humor. A minor record, Matthew, come on, what am I, a dangerous criminal now? I trespass my family places, usually, I said, forcing a grin, but Matthew didn't laugh. His silence hit harder than any insult could have. I sat back, my appetite's gone. So what? This is bothering you now after all this time? It's not like that, he said quickly, running a hand through his hair. It's just hard to ignore when they're talking about it all the time. They think I'm putting my career at risk. Your career? I repeated, bitterness creeping into my tone. Because of me? Tyler, don't. No, it's fine. I cut him off, standing abruptly and grabbing the plates. My hands shook as I dumped the half-eaten food into the trash. I get it. I'm a liability, right? A mark on your otherwise spotless image. That's not what I'm saying, he insisted, his voice rising. Then what are you saying, Matthew? I snapped, spinning around to face him. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds a hell of a lot like you're ashamed of me. His face fell, and for a moment, he looked like he might argue, but then he closed his mouth, his expression hardening. You don't get it, he said finally, his voice quieter but still tense. You're right, I said bitterly. I don't get why someone who's supposed to care about me would let a bunch of co-workers with nothing better to do get in his head. That's not fair, he shot back. No, you know what's not fair? I said, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to keep it steady. Feeling like I have to prove I'm worth it every single day. Like I have to prove I'm good enough for you. And for what? So your buddies can keep their mouths shut? Matthew stood, his chair scraping against the floor. This isn't about them, Tyler. It's about us. No, I said, shaking my head. It's about you. It's about you not trusting me enough to stand by me no matter what anyone says. Plus, you're crazy jealous. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Matthew opened his mouth to reply, but I didn't give him the chance. Maybe you should figure out what you really want, I said, turning away. My chest felt tight, and my eyes burned, but I refused to let the tears fall. Matthew didn't say anything as I walked out of the kitchen. By the time I heard the front door close behind him, I was already sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor and wondering how things had unraveled so quickly, and whether we'd be able to put them back together. The silence between us stretched for days. I kept waiting for him to call, but my phone stayed stubbornly quiet. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email from him. It was an invitation to a youth art showcase. That was odd, out of character mostly, but people don't say curiosity killed the cat for nothing. So, I found myself walking into the community center that evening, unsure of what to expect. He stood by the door, looking as uncertain as I did. He wasn't in uniform, but plain button-down and jeans, and still carrying that unmistakable air of control. His eyes passed thoroughly from everyone until they landed on me. "Hey," he said softly. "Wasn't sure if you'd show up, but thanks for coming." I nodded, entering as he gestured for me to go inside. The room was filled with color. Bright, chaotic canvases lined the walls, the kind only kids could create. Little bursts of imagination and energy, unfiltered and raw. I stopped in front of a painting, a messy swirl of blues and yellows that somehow worked together. Despite myself, my heart softened. And painting was also art. Photography needed more investment, and we'd deal with that later. I sensed his perfume before he even spoke. "I've been thinking of how much you wanted to help young artists one day," he said behind me, this voice so slow I could hear my own heartbeats under my chest. "So, I made a few phone calls, found some schools, and helped organize this." I turned to face him. "You did what?" "This. I found some sponsors, and we created this space for them." He pointed to all the teenagers and kids around. "They'll have free classes twice a month at first, but it's a good start, right?" I glanced around the room. A young boy, barely 7, was explaining his painting to a group of teenagers, his small hands gesturing wildly as they nodded along, smiling. Across the room, 2 girls giggled as they posed for a photo in front of their artwork. Matthew wasn't just giving them a space, he was giving them a voice. I stared at him, stunned. How could he have 2 so opposite sides like that? Why did... It was your second dream, right? Since I messed up the first, I thought I could actually help into another one. I opened my mouth, but he stopped me again. I know I've been difficult. It's just his hands were shaking, so I took them between my own, and I could hear him exhale. I've spent so much feeling like I was never enough, that if I followed the rules and became the protector, nobody would leave me. I looked at him, like he was a whole new person. "What?" I asked. My chest tightened, the weight of his words cutting through me. How could someone so strong, so composed, carry this kind of pain all along? He hesitated, then took another deep breath. "I don't talk about this much, but my parents left when I was 8, dropped me at my grandma's and never came back. When I was 15, she died, and I wandered from aunt to aunt until my adult age." The rawness in his voice cut through me. "Matthew, please, don't pity me. Just listen. The first guy I ever loved left me saying I was too much, that I smothered him, and after that day, I understood what he said. I did the same to you." He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "So, yeah, I guess I've spent my whole life trying to hold on too tight because I'm terrified of losing people. And you." He touched my face with tenderness. "You're all I never knew I wanted, and I'm destroying this too." I stepped closer without thinking, looking him up for a hug. But he put a hand on my chest, stopping me, and I furrowed a brow. I've been seeing someone, a therapist, in the time we weren't talking. His gaze was intense and fragile at the same time. I didn't want to come here tonight until I could promise you that I'm working on it. On me. My breath caught. I want to do better, he said slowly. To deserve you. To fix me. Even if you don't want me anymore, I'll keep doing this for myself. The room seemed to fall away momentarily, leaving just the two of us, standing in a corner, surrounded by art and smiles. In front of me was a broken man, one I loved. I brushed his cheek. Trust me, I said. Be honest with me, talk, and we'll overcome it all. For the first time, a flicker of certainty passed between us. Maybe we start small, I added. Take it one step at a time. He nodded, his lips curved into a faint smile. Yeah, no rush, just moving forward. I glanced at the room again, the vibrant paintings glowing under soft lights. Together, I said lowly. I trust you. On us, he said again, and for the first time, I believed him. We stood there in the quiet, the hum of the distant chatter filling the gaps between us. For once, neither of us felt the need to fill the silence. As I looked around the room at the bright, messy canvases that represented so much potential, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we had a shot at painting something beautiful too. Who would have thought one mistaken imprisonment would lead to the best love I'd ever known? What started as an escape from the mundane became something I never wanted to untangle. In our first year, Matthew kept seeing his therapist and picked up painting, despite my protests. He said working with the kids had sparked something in him. Watching that once stiff man covered in paint, sleeves rolled up, was a sight I'd never imagined when he first drove me to the police station. As for me, my photography career was finally taking shape. The gallery show opened doors I'd only dreamed of. For once, I felt exactly where I needed to be. Of course, we had our moments, small disagreements, human nature. He teased me about triple-checking emails. I reminded him not everything needed a plan, but we laughed more. We communicated. We found our rhythm. Then, one quiet night, it happened. I love you, he said, simply, confidently. I looked at him, saw no hesitation, just certainty. I love you too, Officer Handsome. He kissed my head, and I knew we weren't perfect, but we were building something beautiful, together. What's one habit your partner picked up that you secretly love, even if it's a little quirky? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.